This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And tonight, part 2 of our investigative report, Flashes of Light, Strange Phenomena in the South Atlantic, a natural event or a man-made explosion.
Good evening. President Reagan today opened his second White House news conference with some bad news for the bureaucracy. Fewer government workers and a slashed federal payroll. Leslie Stahl reports.
The president started off with an announcement that he plans to reduce federal employment by 63,000 in 2 years.
In just 2 years, these reductions will save the taxpayers $1.3 billion. Millions of Americans today have had to tighten their belts because of the economic conditions, and it's time to put Washington on a diet, too.
He was asked when his economic program would begin to produce results.
We're not promising any instant cure. We don't believe that in a matter of several months, or probably even in the first year, we're going to see more than beginning signs of recovery. But we do believe that if the economies are passed, which and they should be, and the tax program, we should begin to see some effects, I would think, by the end of the 82 year.
Some reporters were threatening to boycott the news conference since questioners were picked ahead of time by lottery. But they didn't. The pre-choosing did seem, though, to sap the session of spontaneity and to produce some awkward moments for the president.
And now, Jim Gerstenstang. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I looked at 1 instead of 3, Jim. I'm sorry. Tom DeFrank.
Some reporters whom past presidents seemed deliberately to avoid were chosen by lottery. One of them asked about the president's appointments.
Did you mean to give a signal to other Republicans that if they don't conform, that off will go their heads?
How can you say that about a sweet fellow like me?
And what about the right to life issue?
Are you opposed to contraception, which also denies the right to life?
No, I am not.
There was a question on abortion and on how public officials should determine when a life begins.
If you found a body on the street and you didn't know whether it was dead or alive, wouldn't you opt on the basis that it was alive and not start shoveling dirt on it until we determine and make, to the best of our ability, a determination of when life begins? We've been opting on the basis that, well, let's consider it they're not alive. I think that everything in our society calls for opting that they might be alive.
The president has appointed several anti-abortion leaders to key posts in the government from where they've been working to kill federal programs that distribute contraceptives and teach family planning. And indeed, those programs have been cut back in the president's economic proposals. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
Labor Secretary Donovan told a congressional hearing today that budget cuts for public job programs would increase unemployment from the present 7.3% to 7.5%. Donovan defended the slash as not particularly humane, but necessary for the economy. 2 government reports today showed improvements in key segments of the economy, but the changes were too slight to cause much optimism. The Labor Department said that wholesale prices rose 0.8% in February, down 0.1% from January's increase. But February's figure still works out to an annual inflation rate of about 10%. And the department said that unemployment dropped 0.1% to 7.3% last month, although teenage joblessness rose to 19.3%. The governors of 8 major auto industry states met with President Reagan today to discuss the plight of their constituents, and the governors urged the president to negotiate with Japan a voluntary limit on auto exports to the United States. The stock market was mixed today. The Reagan administration today set the stage for a major foreign policy battle with Congress. It announced plans to sell Saudi Arabia additional equipment to increase the range and attack power of the F-15 jet fighters already ordered by the Saudis. The State Department said that the approval of extra-large fuel tanks and air-to-air missiles is needed to counter a serious deterioration of American security interests in the region. Israel criticized the U.S. decision, saying it will escalate a Middle East arms race and endanger Israeli security. More on the story from Diane Sawyer.
State Department officials say the military equipment for Saudi Arabia is part of a bigger plan designed to stabilize the Persian Gulf and eventually ensure a U.S. military presence there. With this in mind, the State Department will ask Congress next week for an increase in security assistance of about 10%. Increased military aid not just for Saudi Arabia and Israel, but for Egypt, Oman, Tunisia, Somalia, Kenya, and Morocco as well. Reagan officials insist military increases are needed to combat Soviet gains in Afghanistan, South Yemen, Ethiopia, and to counter Soviet missiles aimed at the Gulf and Soviet troops on the Iranian border. All signs, they say, of creeping Soviet influence. This was the same theme the president struck today at his news conference when he was asked about El Salvador and described the Cubans and Soviets this way.
Those who aren't just aiming at El Salvador, but I think are aiming at the whole of Central and possibly later South America, and I'm sure eventually North America. But this is what we're doing, is trying to stop this destabilizing force of terrorism and guerrilla warfare.
The president again ruled out the use of American troops in El Salvador, even to protect the American advisors who are there.
We realize that there is a risk and a danger. None of them will be going into combat. We can't, I'm sorry to say, make it risk-free, but we shall do our utmost to provide for their safety.
Finally, the president was asked if his tough talk on El Salvador might revive the campaign charge that he is a warmonger.
I didn't start the El Salvador thing. I inherited it. And the previous administration, which probably was as vociferous as anyone in talking about my threat to peace, they were doing what we're doing, sending aid to El Salvador, of the same kind of aid that we're sending. And I've been here more than 6 weeks now and haven't fired a shot.
U.S. officials say El Salvador has prompted a reevaluation of Central America, similar to the reevaluation of the Persian Gulf. They say another comprehensive aid package, this one for Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Honduras, is now under consideration as well. Diane Sawyer, CBS News at the State Department.
The story today in Atlanta is familiar and chilling. Searchers there say they found the body of a black child in an area southeast of downtown. But they don't know if it is that of one of 2 missing black children. 19 other black children have been murdered since July 1979. The area where this body has been found is in DeKalb County, where another body was found just 3 weeks ago. The Supreme Court has refused to block the scheduled execution of convicted murderer Stephen Judy. The Indiana State Supreme Court and the State Clemency Commission also refused appeals on Judy's behalf. Governor Robert Orr has said he will not intervene, all of which makes it appear likely that Judy will die Monday. And that's fine with Judy. Bob Fall reports.
Steve Judy is ready to die for what he did. The 1979 rape and murder near Mooresville, Indiana, of a young mother, and the murder in panic of her 3 young children.
I'm not responsible anymore for what I do. You know, so they've got their chance now, they better kill me.
And he should be killed, says the man whose family Steve Judy destroyed.
In my mind, Stephen Judy's an animal.
But to his adopted family, Steve Judy is also a victim, product of a broken home, a high school dropout, who never got the help that he needed.
There's an emotional, a loving guy there. He knows that something's wrong with him. He said society's not ready to deal with people like him.
What society was ready to do was sentence him to die in the electric chair, and Steve Judy would rather that than spend the rest of his life in a cell.
You know, I'm not fighting them over this. You know, so they've got to do it now.
But the American Civil Liberties Union says executions are morally, legally, and socially wrong, and is desperately trying to stop Judy's, even though he's told them not to.
He is not a very good judge of what is in his own best interest. His wishes are not the issue. What is involved here is not a suicide by Stephen Judy, but an official, ceremonious homicide by the state of Indiana.
So the issue here is not just a troubled, violent man.
There's no sorrow in me.
The issue is also capital punishment.
It may to some be revenge. To us, it's a necessary deterrent, and it's also the only way to prevent these kinds of people from coming back to threaten society, to kill again.
Late today, after the state Supreme Court upheld the Indiana death penalty law, and after another impassioned appeal from Stephen Judy to the ACLU not to interfere, the ACLU threw in the towel, concluding that it has no legal authority to raise objections that Stephen Judy would not raise. Church leaders, though, plan vigils, urge compassion. The convicted killer wants neither.
Why let me take somebody else's life now? You know, they've got their chance now. Let them stop me now.
And now it seems certain the state will. Bob Fall, CBS News, Indianapolis.
Aaron Lee Owens said today, "I don't know how I feel. I really don't know how I feel." But he insisted, "I'm not mad at anybody." But almost a decade ago, he was one of 2 men convicted in a drug-related murder. And as Jerry Bowen reports, Owens has more reason than most to be angry with the system.
Aaron Lee Owens walked into an Oakland courtroom today, 9 years of prison behind him for a double murder he did not commit. A man convicted by perjured testimony and his own remarkable resemblance to the real killer, who police say is still at large. His relatives were in the courtroom too, as the original sentencing judge, who declined to be photographed, set Owens free.
If you were wrongly convicted, we cannot repay your loss. But we can say with some pride that the same system which found you at fault can now set you free.
Owens was embraced by his mother, mobbed by reporters as he took his first steps toward freedom. Freedom won by the original prosecutor in the case, who later successfully fought for Owens' release.
I want to make a statement, and that's that I'm not going to spend too much time with you people because I want to get out of here and see what it's like to be free.
And after nearly a decade in prison, Owens, who admits his past has been one of crime, police say one of drug dealing, Owens, also known by a half-dozen aliases, had his own thoughts on the system.
I'll never forget. I was 28 years old, and they threw me in Folsom Prison. I've been stabbed, I've been in riots, I've been fighting, and didn't even know what I was fighting about. I just had to keep people from fighting. These things wouldn't have happened to me if it wasn't for those people not doing their job properly.
Not only did Owens know he was innocent, but during his prison years actually learned the identity of the alleged killer from his co-defendant in the case. But for reasons he could not explain today, reasons based on that prison moral code which brands forthcoming inmates as snitches, Aaron Lee Owens refused to talk. Owens' release came only when the co-defendant, still in prison, identified another man as his alleged partner. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Oakland.
Researchers estimate that over the past 3 decades, millions of women have been treated with synthetic hormones to prevent unwanted abortions. In the past, studies have shown that exposure to the hormones before birth makes animals more aggressive as adults. Now, a new report by a Rutgers University psychologist in Science magazine says the same thing could happen to humans, that up to 12 million persons whose mothers use the hormones have a much greater potential for aggression than others. But the study adds, in humans, such behavior would be tempered by learning, experience, and other environmental factors. The UN General Assembly today unanimously endorsed 2 resolutions calling for sanctions against South Africa to force that country to give up control of Namibia. The Assembly called on the Security Council to convene urgently to consider the matter. The United States abstained on both votes. Last night, a CBS News investigation looked into persistent reports that mysterious flashes of light off the South African coast in late '79 actually may have been a nuclear test. Tonight, in the second part of our report, Robert Pierpoint takes a look at conflicting explanations for those light flashes and who may have been responsible for them.
More than 10 months after the U.S. spy satellite called Vela spotted what appeared to be a nuclear blast off the coast of South Africa, a panel of scientists assembled by the Carter White House to investigate the incident concluded that the telltale light flashes may have been caused by a tiny meteorite colliding with the spacecraft and reflecting sunlight into its cameras. While not ruling out a nuclear explosion as the cause, the panel's chairman insisted the meteorite scenario, as improbable as it sounds, made more sense.
No, we're not enamored of that explanation. We're just saying that seems more appealing than the others we've heard.
But scientists at the world's largest radio telescope insist there was corroborative evidence. An unusual gravity wave picked up by the telescope on the same night and from the same general direction as the Vela sighting. A readout consistent with nuclear explosions.
Obviously, there was not obviously. Almost certainly, there was a large influx of energy somewhere over South Africa at about the time the Vela satellite saw its flash.
But Dr. Benke was not the only critic of the White House report. CIA analysts who more than 2 years ago concluded that South Africa probably has nuclear weapons told select members of Congress that the South African Navy was conducting secret maneuvers in the area on the night of the incident. A Navy equipped with Israeli-made Reshev-class missile boats and Gabriel missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Then the Defense Intelligence Agency leaked its own reports, concluding the flash probably came from a nuclear explosion of between 1 and 3 kilotons. Shortly after that, another report leaked, this one a secret 300-page analysis by the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory of underwater signals detected at the time of the Vela sighting. The lab's director concluded the signals were detected at the right times and had the approximate characteristics of a nuclear explosion. The evidence is strong enough to make the case in its own right. It was also learned that the National Technical Information Service, a kind of storehouse of non-classified data open to the public, had been filling several subscribers' requests for data concerning detection and countermeasures for nuclear explosions, missile technology, navigation, guidance and control of weapons, and, ironically, data concerning the flight plans, predicted orbit plots, and operations of the Vela satellite. One subscriber was the defense attaché of the South African Embassy in Washington.
Whatever the intelligence community has been telling people on the outside, if they have, and I don't know, about what this or isn't is based, I'm sure, on their judgment based on all data. It's not that they've included intelligence data that we don't have.
But one would assume that they have access to this. They had access to the same material.
There's nothing that we did that they don't know. And I think we probably did a more thorough analysis than was ever done before about this event.
All right, and yet...
There's nothing that they know, to my knowledge, and I'm quite sure is correct, that they have that we don't know.
All right, and yet...
People can come to different judgments on the same data.
And apparently have. The Central Intelligence Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency...
I think I'd be a little careful about that. You better be sure that you're saying the agencies have, not individuals within the agencies.
I'm saying analysts within the Central Intelligence Agency.
That may be the case, but
the Defense Intelligence Agency.
That may be the case. There are, as I said, different people looking at the same data. I'm sure it can come up with somewhat different judgments. We're not definitely saying it wasn't, and they're not definitely saying it was.
But the question persists. Did the White House withhold information from Dr. Ruina and the panel? On January 21st of this year, London's respected newspaper, The Economist, published an anonymous dispatch labeled confidential in its Foreign Report newsletter, concluding, Israel now has as many as 200 nuclear weapons, and that the Israelis have indeed been cooperating with South Africa and Taiwan on the developments of missile delivery systems. Information confirmed to CBS News by intelligence sources. The Economist dispatch goes on to say, Foreign Report believes President Carter withheld intelligence reports about this cooperation from the independent panel of experts. Israel and South Africa have issued routine denials. That was followed weeks later by reports of another unusual incident in the South Atlantic, this one a flash of infrared radiation detected by an early warning satellite last December 15th. A Johannesburg newspaper quoted U.S. intelligence officials as saying it was caused by a nuclear explosion. But the State Department and the Pentagon blamed a meteor.
We believe that the event, quote event, was natural and not man-made.
The December incident has not caused the White House panel to reevaluate its conclusion that a meteor probably also caused the September 1979 flash. Dr. Leonard Weiss of the Senate Subcommittee on Nuclear Proliferation told CBS News he was skeptical about that finding 6 months ago.
I'm a little surprised at the zeal with which some people have tried to bring to the question of proving that this was not a nuclear event. Certainly there is, it does present, if it was a nuclear event, it presents a great political problem for the United States. and how we deal with it would not be the easiest question to ask of somebody. And I don't think it is possible to lay to rest this event with a report that indicates that a group of people feel that the probability of its not being a nuclear event is perhaps greater than half, and on that basis we all ought to forget about it and go to sleep.
The Reagan White House plans no further investigation of either incident. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, Washington.
The Polish government today continued its crackdown on dissidents, charging 4 of them with seeking the violent overthrow of the country, an offense that could mean death. Meanwhile, Poland's largest independent union, Solidarity, reacted defiantly to Soviet orders that the labor rebellion be curtailed. Union leader Lech Walesa said that no one can accuse us of being cowards and pledged to continue efforts to oust dishonest government officials. Walesa has been trying to keep labor peace, traveling around the country to resolve local disputes before they become national issues. In Kabul, Afghanistan, gunmen who for 5 days have been holding a hijacked Pakistani plane with 116 persons aboard, including 6 Americans, shot one of the hostages today and threw him onto the runway. The victim, a Pakistani diplomat, died in a Kabul hospital 2 hours later. The 3 hijackers gave Pakistan until tomorrow morning to meet their demand that about 90 of their friends and relatives be released from Pakistani jails, but they didn't say what they would do then. Space officials said today our confidence is growing, and so they said that given no new surprises and no new problems, the maiden launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia should take place on schedule during the week of April 6th. Earlier this week, problems repairing the external fuel tank threatened another delay for the shuttle, already 3 years behind schedule. And given the possibility of another hitch, an official cautioned, my personal opinion is the launch will be sometime in mid-April. This is my last broadcast as the anchorman of the CBS Evening News. For me, it's a moment for which I long have planned, but which nevertheless comes with some sadness. For almost 2 decades, after all, we've been meeting like this in the evenings, and I'll miss that. But those who have made anything of this departure, I'm afraid, have made too much. This is but a transition, a passing of the baton. A great broadcaster and gentleman, Doug Edwards, preceded me in this job, and another, Dan Rather, will follow. And anyway, the person who sits here is but the most conspicuous member of a superb team of journalists, writers, reporters, editors, producers, and none of that will change. Furthermore, I'm not even going away. I'll be back from time to time with special news reports and documentaries, and beginning in June, every week with our science program, Universe. Old anchormen, you see, don't fade away. They just keep coming back for more. And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6, 1981. I'll be away on assignment, and Dan Rather will be sitting in here for the next few years. Good night.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Johnny Miller's